reliever have a tie to autism or ADHD. A federal class action lawsuit has been filed claiming if taken during pregnancy could have neurological impacts on the baby.
It's a big deal, but not all doctors and even the FDA are painting the same picture. Fox Carolina's Carrie Beal is here looking at all sides.
The ingredient that's really at question here is acetaminophen. This is a pain reliever that's not just found in Tylenol, but all sorts of cold medicine. Attorney and families in these lawsuits are referencing several studies. In 2018, researchers reviewed 7 studies involving 132,000 mothers and children. This analysis found mothers who took acetaminophen during pregnancy had a higher risk of their children developing autism and ADHD. But it's important to note that many of these studies looked at an association and not a causation. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists reviewed the study and others. They concluded there is no clear evidence that proves direct relationship between acetaminophen and developmental issues. For example, this study included self-reporting, and researchers noted risk could be due to environmental factors or other medications taken rather than acetaminophen exposure alone. The Cleveland Clinic points to yet another study that found taking small amounts of acetaminophen during pregnancy and would not increase risk. It's also important to note that running a fever during pregnancy can lead to birth defects in the child. Researchers at Duke Health found a fever can interfere with the developmental of the baby's heart and jaw during the first trimester. Acetaminophen is a fever reducer. Johnson & Johnson, who makes Tylenol, released a statement to us. It said in part these lawsuits lack legal merit and scientific report. The misinformation campaign launched by the plaintiffs is irresponsible and could lead to serious health consequences for expecting parents. So it's important to talk with your doctor if you're pregnant and you have any questions about medications to take. We will include links to all of these studies mentioned on our website at foxcarolina.com. Justin, Tori.